Joe, I like that profile pic.
Yeah,
That's that's iconic.
It's like you go pre-COVID,
it's pretty good. Yeah.
and then that with the straight downhill.
Yeah. I think my old army sergeant once said, always set that low standard because you can always go up. So,
That's right.
I mean, I do that really well. So.
We were also clean cut. Those were the days.
Yep, I get it.
No longer.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to, grow one of those social isolation beards, and I was quickly disabused of that by somebody in my household. So
Stubble started to pop up, and he just got
that was it.
rejected.
Then she pointed out that I can't pull it off, so I was like, "Wow, that's a little hurtful." It's all good.
Nice to put out there on public record, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna start recording.
Okay, good. I feel better now.
Rich, it's great that you took that picture of your office and you got it as a background for this.
No, yeah, we do what we get. I mean, right? Got to let the board know we're there. So, well, what can we do? Someone came in and saw my desk was full of, cleaning supplies and things. We're pretty impressed.
Don't drink that, Rich.
Yeah, don't drink that.
No, you don't drink it. You inject it.
Oh, gotcha.
I thought that was recommended. I'm confused.
Yeah.
All righty. Gina, how are we doing?
We're good. Go ahead.
We are good. All righty, we're back. And so with that, Rich, you've got that lovely American flag in the background there. Would you be kind enough to lead us in the pledge?
Yes, certainly. Pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Rich. The record show we're all here. We'll move on to correspondence if we have any.
I do not have any myself.
Thanks, Gina. Rich, any announcements?
I've received some great correspondence from just in terms of emails and things from our community, both complimenting our teachers on their hard work and then providing some great suggestions as well on how we can continue to evolve and go forward. And, that's appreciated, greatly. Everybody likes to know, that their hard work is paying off and having an impact. And so I know our teachers really appreciate it when our community reaches out to them and says, hey, thanks a lot. Our kids enjoyed this or our kids love this activity. And also our teachers really appreciate it when people say, hey, thank you for what you're doing. And have you thought about this? Because this is what I'm seeing at home, because this is new, uncharted territory for all of us. And the only way it works is through that two-way communication. And so we, very appreciative of parents who take the time to reach out. And it's all been, wonderfully positive, and we absolutely appreciate it. And the teachers and our staff members are working extremely hard and very effectively. I know that speaking to some of them, where they were at week one versus where they are here, I don't now. I know that they're really proud of their own work as well and their own growth. And, everybody's working really hard, and we appreciate that. And I will say that this week as well, the only other correspondence I would have is that the State Education Department is asking us to resubmit educational plans. And so we are, since we just got that this week, we'll be working to do that. And knowing that, again, what we're doing now is very different than what we were doing previously. So, good stuff, all the way around in that regard.
Rich, just a question there on that educational plan point. Is that specific to what's taking place in the current environment, or is that something else?
Oh, I apologize. Yes, that's specific to what's taking place in the current environment. That we have to resubmit that. And what that is that you go into this wonderful thing called the portal, super secret stuff, and answer a series of drop-down questions and, or in this case, upload some information. So we'll be looking at that and, seeing what we're doing and probably working with our team leads and our faculty to say, okay, where are we? And, what are we able to achieve?
Thanks.
I think it's worth noting that we are almost, I think at the end of the week, we're at the halfway point between when this started and the end of the school year.
Yep.
Like this has gone on for a long time. And if we're going to go back, they're almost at a point where if they don't send schools back soon, it won't make sense to send them back at all. Right. So that's probably in your thinking too, right? You're planning for.
Yeah. It certainly is. I think the reality is that our governor has been very focused upon science in making these determinations. He's very cognizant, obviously, of the leadership role that New York State plays in everything: finance, education, medicine. And so, my thought would be, again, he's going to base his determinations on what he feels is best for, New York, best for the country, best for the children. So we'll see. I mean, it absolutely may be that he look at a more staggered approach depending upon the geographic determinism of districts. And we're hoping for some guidance this Friday from him in terms of, are we going to extend it further? Are we going to be able to start reopening or what have you? I think so much of it, again, depends on science and where we're at. I know that to your point, Joe, as you say, when we're hard to believe, but it's Friday is May 1st. And, at that point, we really have to, look at who we are as a district, who we are as a state, and make some determinations on how we're going to continue to provide for the kids. It's hard. It's a lot of, hard work. It's trial and error. It's finding out what works. It's finding out, new technologies. It's finding out tried and true measures of education that you can adapt to the two technologies. And so, yeah, there's certainly a lot there. And to your point, it's almost the nexus, right, between the beginning and the end of the school year. And there's also some unanswered questions out there that we're looking for guidance on. What's the budget vote going to be like? What is the vote for trustees going to look like? Is it going to be done via absentee ballot? Will it be pushed back into June? Will it be pushed back to July? Lots of questions that I know we're all asking, and that we know that our constituents and the people that we represent need to have answers to as well.
Thank you, Rich. Anything further? Announcement wise? Okay, so thanks for all of that. Moving on now to the main event, to the budget discussion for the evening.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So this update is for the budget presentation that is dated April 29th, 2020. That was in your library and on the agenda. And this is going from the May 25th document to today. So if you look on page 1, under district priorities, under the instruction box, the third bullet, we changed that to read developing a rigorous and comprehensive curriculum aligned with standards of excellence and assessment practices. And then on the fourth bullet, we reworded that to read providing professional development to all staff. If you have any questions during any of these pages, just stop me and we can go over them. On page 2, the budget at a glance, we are proposing a budget of $31,147,842, which is a $334,512 increase, or 1.09% from year to year. We're continuing to propose a simple majority tax levy allowed under the tax cap of the $25,613,186, or a 0.57% increase. We've also clarified under these two boxes the second bullet to read provides for a bus in the transportation equipment budget line. On page 3, budget changes at a glance. I've tried to make this summary as self-explanatory as possible to the reader. I know previously that this had been a little confusing, so I've been trying to rework it. You'll see that in the first column, the one that's titled line item, there are both exact codes listed, and in some instances, there's a cluster of codes. For example, if you look at the fourth one down, increase in employee benefits, that's a cluster of codes instead of listing all of them separately, such as ERS, TRS, life insurance, health insurance, etc. I've listed all of those in a cluster. But if you continue down, you'll see that I've removed from that workers' compensation and unemployment insurance, because that is a major change that we're proposing in the creation of reserves. Okay, so on page 4, the budgeted revenue page.
Lisa, I have a question. I have a question on page 3. More for the benefit of the public. The decrease in other appropriations, in this case, other appropriations refers to dollars that were previously allocated to the tax reserve.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Yes, yes. In that, I could put decrease in other appropriations, and in parentheses, put tax cert reserve.
I personally think that would be helpful, unless there's an objection.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, so then the pie chart on page 4 for budgeted revenues has been updated to reflect the changes in revenues since the last meeting. Nothing has been changed on page 5, which is our
Tina,
tax.
can I ask, I just want to ask about state aid. I hear in the pipeline that state aid is not a sure thing for next year, that we're looking at a possible reduction.
Correct.
Is that-
I have that, Joe, under page 8, under revenue. I was going to address that.
Okay, so this, looking at this pie chart, that takes in consideration that decrease?
This
Or
pie, the number that we are presenting in this budget is what we know as of today.
okay, so this is subject to change, and we believe that there will be a reduction in state aid.
This is subject to change once the division of budget, it closes tomorrow. The first time period closes April 30th. And they're asking to give them until May 15th to make a determination so the governor can decide what he's going to reduce. Okay,
Remember, that's why correspondingly, they've pushed out our need to adopt a budget until the 15th as well. So that if we have to make changes, when we have to make changes to this budget, we're able to modify it, bring it back for final approval by the board.
correct. So then if you go to page 6, the tax projections, Ira has confirmed, and Charlie had brought to my attention, that the town of Greenberg does extend their tax rates out by 4 decimal places, and the town of Mount Pleasant extends by 6 places. So I've made those corrections on this page. Ira also confirmed that if the budget to budget amount changes, but the tax levy does not, then the tax rates would not change. The tax rates are based on what the levy is that you set. But recently, Ira has received notifications of updated assessment changes due to small claims, which are called SCARs, as well as exemptions that have either been removed or reinstated for the town of Greenberg. He has not received any of this similar information from the town of Mount Pleasant, and doesn't believe that the SCARs that are pending and the settlements that are also pending in Mount Pleasant will be settled before the tax levy is set. Since there's been a change in the assessments for the town of Greenberg, Ira has adjusted the tax rates to reflect these changes because assessments have changed for each town, therefore changing the tax rates for both. So we've made those changes to the assessments and to the projected tax rates on this page per what Ira knows as of now. Okay, and then if you go to page 8, the revenue detail page. Changes that have been made on this page are 1, under sales tax. A decrease is projected now for sales tax revenue. On the March 25th document, we projected that we would collect approximately $300,000 in sales tax revenue with the 1% increase in the rate for Westchester. But since that meeting and amidst the COVID-19 crisis, it has been recommended and talked about through all of Westchester's business officials and at our meetings that we should adjust these this budgeted amount to reflect what happened 8 to 10 years ago during a recession. So I went back and I analyzed those years, and as such, I've decreased this. So from the March 25th meeting to what we're proposing of $204,000, that was a $96,000 decrease. But for this for this school year, it was projected that there would be $240,000 collected. So the difference between the 240 and the 204 is the $36,000 of change. The other change.
Sorry, can I stop you, Lisa? That was
Sure.
helpful. Thanks for explaining that. I don't really understand under the notation at the bottom why you list the anticipated decrease in sales tax revenue as 96, because the 300 was never adopted by us.
No, it wasn't adopted. It was proposed in the last document.
But
so none of this has been adopted yet. I was just going from what was proposed from one date to another.
okay, but the applied fund balance, how you're using the money, the applied fund balance, you're saying 96,000 of it is for the state, for the sales tax revenue decrease?
Yes.
I'm just.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you remember at the last meeting, our budget wasn't balanced,
Okay,
right? Remember there was that $233,000 difference. That all ties into it, into the calculation.
so you're saying we would have had to have 300 for it to all balance out, and since we're not going to have that.
And then what we did was we proposed some cuts. Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Right, but I'm sorry, I'm confused too. I'm sorry, where is the sales tax revenue line?
Oh, that is called non-property tax distribution. The third line down.
1120.
Right, so I'm as confused, or I was gonna say as confused as Susan, but I'm just gonna say I'm confused because we're saying the anticipated change year over year is 36,000, but yeah, we're covering a 96,000 drop. That is confusing.
Okay, so in the April 20th memo that I had sent to everyone, that was reconciling from the March 25th to now. So like I said, we had a $233,444 gap in the budget at that time that we needed to address to balance the budget. But on top of that, that's also when some of these revenue items came to light, such as not going to collect as much sales tax, not going to get as much state aid as we had projected. So I had to take all of that into account in order to balance both sides to be the 31,147,842.
Right, but I think, so applied fund balance should be used to address one-off items. So if you have a one-off expense, there's something that we need to spend money on this year that we know we're not going to have to spend money on the next year. That would be a good use of the applied fund balance. And likewise, on the revenue side, if there was a drop in revenue that we knew was specific to this year, but that next year we won't have that drop, then you would want to itemize that, and it wouldn't be related to a prior draft version of the budget. It would be just specifically related to, for whatever reason, this year we anticipate 204,000, but next year it's going to be 250. So we could cover 46,000 of lost revenue because next year it's going to go up 46,000. I'm a little confused, and I'm not used to using a prior draft version and the difference between drafts to explain this.
Okay,
So I'd be more comfortable if we just said, here are specific expenses that are only going to happen next year, or these are specific revenue reductions that will only happen next year.
okay,
And that we can like write them down and say, this is what the reduction revenue is. This is why it's happening in 2021. It won't happen in 21, 22. It's easier, I think, with expenses. Just to throw an example, I mean, like the generator that we're looking at, you're only going to buy that generator once. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but
okay,
if you said, hey, we got to buy a generator, you could use applied fund balance for the generator because you know you're not buying one the next year.
one the next year. Got it. Okay.
Or, Charlie, are you saying then that it's okay to cover the sales tax decrease, but only for the 36,000 that we anticipate for next year, but not using the applied fund balance as a way to balance your budget?
Only if Rich and Lisa felt very comfortable that that 36 drop is going to come back in
Gonna come back
21-20.
next year.
You know, if they said, look, 204, this is specifically related to the pandemic. Next year, when we're sitting here at the table, that's going to be 240. You know, I'm confident that'll be 240. Then I would be okay with it. I'm a little, you know, that seems to fluctuate. You know, we see 2017, 18, it was 231, then it's 256. Now we're going to, it was 240, then 204. It's not clear to me it's a one-off item. That's why. That's why
Okay.
I'm uncomfortable.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
I have a question on the same line. So just to make sure that I'm following. So you're projecting a 15% drop in sales taxes for this year,
For next school year.
for next school year, but based
Yes.
on, okay,
Right.
okay. Don't, I mean, given the drop off, and I guess you've got a confidence level in that number, because I feel like it could be even a lot steeper than that, just based on
It could be.
what's happening in
But
the economy
again,
with spending.
I'm basing it on history.
But I think that the recession from 2008, 2009 is probably a pretty modest baseline versus where we're going. You know, I'm not a
Well,
economics
again,
forecaster, but I think it's probably we're going into a much worse situation. It may be
Right.
maybe shorter lived. That remains to be
True.
seen, but it's going to be probably a lot deeper than what we saw in 2008, 2009.
It could be true. They also predict, though, you got to remember, we're always a quarter behind in our collection.
Mhm.
Okay. But they're also predicting that we should get a payment the beginning of May. The next payment we get, they feel will be a false estimate on what can be projected, because they feel that because people are hoarding and are overbuying, it's going to overstate sales tax, and that's not going to be a reality.
Overbuying what? Overbuying.
Yeah, all kinds of goods.
They are right now, or they will be.
No, they are now. And remember, we don't get the revenue for now for 2 more quarters.
I just think it's interesting because I mean they're overbuying. If there's any stocking up going on, it's in the grocery sector where there isn't any sales
Right.
tax collected. Everything else is pretty much shut down. So again, I'm not an expert in the area, but I don't know that we would be seeing hoarding happening in the sales tax space right now. And my concern is that we're not being conservative enough on this line, is what I'm saying. I
Okay,
think
alright.
it could, and again, I'm not the
I can-
expert here, but I feel like could be worse.
All right, let me look at that number again, and let me reach out to some of our partner schools and other people in Westchester to see exactly what it is they're doing also.
Appreciate it.
Okay, not a
Yep,
problem.
appreciate that.
Lisa, I
Okay,
was going to
yes.
ask you, but you partially already answered it. Of the 240 that we projected for this year, what do you think we're going to collect?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think that we will be over the 240. I don't think we'll be over by, grossly over, but I think we'll be maybe closer to the 2018-19 number of the 256.
when will you have confidence in that number? Is it after May when you get that other number in?
I get that number in the next quarter. I get in the beginning of May. Yes, I'll have a number for you.
I think that might be helpful to know, based
Sure.
on what Al was saying, to see if people truly are hoarding the goods that have sales tax.
Yeah.
I think like things like paper towels and toilet paper, you do pay tax on, but not on food and grocery
Not
items.
on food, right? Only
So
prepared
hoarding,
foods,
they're
right.
not hoarding, at least not that I'm aware of, they're not hoarding high value items.
Yeah, okay, okay. So then the other numbers that changed were state aid. And Joe, this is where at the last, so the governor proposed $1,325,616 in state aid for Canico, which is the first numbers of any given year that are always released. Then once the budget is adopted, then we get a more concrete number once both sides agree. So they predicted, or they gave Pecanico $1,311,630, but written into the law was that the pandemic adjustment that the federal government is giving to any school district, the governor can subtract from state aid. So in the budget runs that were released, the governor subtracted the $34,338 in pandemic relief adjustment from our aid, so that we're only projected at this point to get $1,277,292. But as I said, tomorrow is the deadline, and then the Division of Budget is going to be analyzing the numbers. And between the Division of Budget and the Office of the State Comptroller, they're going to come out with where our revenues are. And if they are less than 99% collected and expenditures are over 101%, then the governor will propose a reduction in state aid.
Right. Now I understand that he's talking about,
He'll propose a reduction, excuse me, across the board to everybody, but school districts are also included in that.
right. And I understand that he's talking about adjusting it quarterly. So not just
Yes,
annually. but-
Yes. Every quarter, it will be looked at and it can be adjusted. So it's not, if he, like right now, he's saying it's going to, he's proposing a 20% reduction. That could just be for right now, but then the next quarter, if it gets worse, he could add more to it.
Or take away more.
That's what I meant, take away more, yes.
Right. So, I mean, it's a big number.
Projections, the gravest projections that I've heard is that he could take up to 50% of state aid.
Right. So at 1.3 million in state aid, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we would potentially lose.
Correct.
So,
It's very difficult to budget for that.
so
Correct.
I have a
So
question on
what-
that. I have a question on that, Lisa. So, and this is probably not typically done, and I don't know if it can be done, but are we obliged to include, in this budget, whatever the latest number is as a snapshot from the state?
No,
So
no.
in theory, then we could risk adjust this number and say, we think we're only going to get 60% of this or 70% of this. And then if we get a
Correct.
positive surprise, that's great. We get a positive surprise.
If we get
we
a
don't get a negative
positive
surprise.
surprise, then what that is that would go to fund balance.
Okay.
But we're at our tax cap. I don't know that we could just drop the revenue because our tax levy would go up, and I think we'd exceed our tax cap. I may be wrong.
Yes, if we kept the budget the way it is, if you wanted to keep the 31,147,842, but reduce state aid, that monies has to come from somewhere else, whether we cut in the budget, we apply more fund balance, just for example, or you exceed the 50% and go with supermajority.
So Lisa, question just about the pandemic adjustment. Where in the budget would I see the federal aid coming in?
You won't, because it's federal monies, it goes to the federal funds. So what has to happen is, they haven't exactly told us how we have to account for it. They've just said that it is federal money, so it's accounted for in the federal funds. So really, what we could do, though I have a question out there to state aid planning, just to make sure it is okay, we can do this. We could make an interfund transfer on the revenue side. Once the federal monies came in in the federal funds, we could transfer it over to the general fund. I just want to make sure that with this new adjustment that we can do that.
Right, but the point I was getting at, what I was trying to get to was, you've already reduced the state aid, assuming that since the governor has the right to deduct the 34,000 if we get it from the federal government, but you
Right.
haven't credited us for the federal government yet. So that would mean to me that we're missing 34,000 of revenue.
No, I'm going to credit that in the federal funds. So what that means is that we could take an expense from here, like we do with Title I, Title II.
No, but Lisa, wait, my point is you've reduced revenue.
Yes,
Yes, we could take it and move it in later, but you've reduced our revenue by 34,000.
yes.
But we're either going to get it from the federal government, or if the federal government doesn't give it to us, we'll get it from the state. The state only reduces it if we don't.
No, not necessarily, because it's my understanding that even though, I mean, the federal government might not give us the money eventually,
But then the governor can't reduce
the
it.
state has to.
I'm sorry, I'm confused, because you said if the federal government gives us the 34,000, the governor has the right to reduce our state aid by the 34,000. So either way,
Right.
we're going to be flat, because either the federal government gives it to us and the governor reduces, or the federal government doesn't give it to us and the state gives it to us. So I don't understand why we're reducing revenue by 34,000. Because either way, we get the 34,000. It's just we don't know who's going to give it to us.
See, I would argue and just put out there that within his aid run, the governor is, just as we're doing, is predicating that upon the federal government providing us that money. So he's saying, I'm already subtracting it. He's not correspondingly make a promise that if you don't get it from the federal government, you are going to, I will increase you. So I think kind of what Al was saying is that we haven't been provided any information as of yet on our federal funds. And, we want to be as conservative as possible in that regard. So
I think that goes to what Joe was saying, which is we see a 20% reduction this quarter, maybe next quarter it's 30 or 40%. That's where you're being conservative. The 34,000, we either get it from the federal government or we get it from the state. Then there's another pot of money where the state may say, you know what, we're cutting it by 50%. It's sort of I think we need to be conservative in a different area than that. I think highlighting this 34,000 and saying that it's an adjustment specifically for New York State pandemic may not be exactly right. That's all.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a good point in that.
Okay.
And that's part of the frustration that we're all dealing with is every one of the unknowns and anticipating. But it's a good point. We can certainly change it.
Well, again, I will reach out again tomorrow to Jay O'Connor from State Aid Planning just to get better clarification on that, definitely.
Right. I mean, it seems to me, and maybe I don't have it right, that even months from now, the state could say, we promised you X, we're not giving you that.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
that can happen.
So our planning has to be, take that into consideration is what I'm.
Yeah, I agree. We might want a whole separate page in here that sort of talks to that. What are we planning on doing? Rich, what's your plan if the state comes back in 3 months and says, you know what, your state aid's going down to,
Yep.
dropping 500,000.
Yeah,
Right.
no, we can certainly do that.
And we have been talking about that, how we would stagger our expenses, how we would, evaluate almost everything that's in the budget.
So then,
Could save, or when we had to.
so Lisa, Rich, the game plan then is to assume for now that we're getting the dollars that are on this revenue page, but prepare in the background to get less than that and have a game plan for it.
Mhm.
Is that's the
Yes,
preferred
and
approach?
that's why, right, we're asking in the memo that I had sent you earlier today, it is recommended by the Department of Budget that you not adopt a budget until they have released their numbers by the May 15th.
Right. But even then, to Joe's point, if they're releasing numbers quarterly around the aid figures,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what happens in May 15th. We could
Correct.
have an $800,000 hole in our budget
Yes.
if we lose 50% of the,
Time, correct,
know.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I mean, not to make this more doom and gloom, but for as much as we think 2021 is a hard budget to do, they say 21, 22 is going to be even harder.
we look forward to that.
Yeah.
Look forward to that.
Like I said, they predict a $61 billion loss by 2024. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
actually, sorry, just a quick comment on another, on a related topic. You know, we've talked about the potential surplus that we have, and we've talked about moving that into the capital project reserve. But that money can only be voted out by the community for capital projects, is my understanding.
exactly.
Given the uncertainty around the state aid, maybe we can talk to council about if there are any other options for us to reserve money in the event that there's a huge shortfall. Because, you know, if we find out in August that you're missing $500,000, that's going to be a big problem.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, any money that you put into any reserves except for the capital reserve, you can vote to bring that back out if the budget needed it at the time. And or I know you guys know that we're only allowed to keep 4%, but there are a lot of schools, and not saying that it's correct, but there are a lot of schools who are keeping more than 4% in anticipation that they're going to have to use that excess fund balance to offset the state aid cuts that are coming.
They're just taking the slap on the wrist for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
not
and
a
some
terrible
schools,
strategy.
some
Yeah.
schools are passing resolutions by the board that acknowledges that we're keeping more than the 4%. But in light of world events, et cetera, that money will be needed
As a contingency. Yeah.
offset or to help the budget. So, I mean, it's just something to think about.
So just to be clear, are you saying for this page, you're going to take out the pandemic adjustment and just have another page of just kind of like that analysis?
I'm going to reach out again to state aid planning. Let me speak with them to see where they are at and what their knowledge is, because they've been working and lobbying with the state and the federal government. Let me see where they're at with where they think the 34, the pandemic adjustment is coming into account. And I'll either remove it or I'll add another line that says federal interfund transfers and bring that money back to the general fund.
Okay, I was also going to suggest, it's just a small point for clarity, that if you do keep it the way it is, you have the pandemic adjustment dollar change, but really you need another line in there to subtract the 34,000 from the figure above, because your dollar change column is your dollar change from 1920, not your dollar, right? Or
Yeah, it's not within the school year, correct.
Yeah, yes.
Right.
yes.
so I think it would just
Okay.
maybe
I see
make
what you're saying.
make it more clear if you actually
Okay.
subtracted out that number, because you don't really need a percentage for that line,
Got it.
because there
Mhm.
isn't an adjustment. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Nope, got it, got it. And then we've already talked about the applied fund balance, which once we rework some of these numbers, we will definitely take into account what you have brought up, Charlie, definitely.
All right.
Okay, on page 10, the significant budget items. It was suggested that the last paragraph, once everything is totaled, that the last line accounts for 100% of the budgeted expenditures, which I adjusted to make sure that it all did come down to 100. Then if you go,
Lisa, just a quick comment on that. The
sure,
original intent of this page, which I think it's been in the budget now for, this would be, I think, the third year, was really to illustrate for the community the percentage of the budget that really isn't very discretionary, just in terms of there's certain expenses that, we gotta,
we have to pay.
we have to pay. And it's kind of, you're copying and pasting from year to year. There isn't a whole lot of discretion that goes on. There's of course, some, but it's marginal. It really was to highlight the portion of the budget that is not really discretional from year to year. So
Okay.
I think it's fine to put the 100% figure in there, but just for clarity, the reason why it wasn't 100% prior was to show the percentage of the budget that really is kind of rolled
Is
over
not.
from year to year.
Okay, I can do it either way, whichever way you'd like. I did it that way originally, but then I had the recommendation or the suggestion to make it.
I
so-
guess my preference is it's fine to keep the 100% there. You don't need to get rid of it, but I think it's good to highlight the percentage that is kind of, for lack of a better term, non-discretionary, because I
For
think it's,
each, yes.
for me,
Okay,
that was
yep.
a really big eye opener as I started to get more engaged with the
Yes.
budget in my first year. And I think for a lot of people in the community, it also is, because, to the
Correct.
uninitiated, when you're looking at the total budget, it can be, a big figure. There's a lot in there. And then, how much of it is actually rolled over from year to year, quote unquote, versus, truly discretionary. So,
Mhm. Yep,
I mean, Al, maybe the way to do it is to have sort of 3 sections. You've got the major items listed on the page.
mhm.
You then have the remaining amount that is non-discretionary, which won't get to 100. And then
Right.
there's the remaining amount that gets you to 100.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's fine.
okay, yep. Got it.
I thought the non-discretionary was on this page, so then that adds up to 79.25%, and the rest of that is
I think these are
Um,
just the significant ones, Kasama, not all of them.
I see.
Yep.
Yep, exactly. Okay, then to show you the areas of the budget that we adjusted, if you go to page 15, that's where the budget in detail begins with the Board of Education expenses. As you guys had requested and finally got through my thick head, how it is you wanted it. I've given you 2 years of history, what the current year's budget is, and then what the proposed budget is that we are presenting to you for the 2020-2021 school year. So the changes that we have made have been under page 20. Under maintenance, we have removed the purchase of the utility vehicle in the maintenance department. And then on page 21, under, there's a bottom italics asterisk bullet point to show under judgment and claims what we have spent this year. And I have also spoken with Ira. He anticipates no further payments to be made or settled for the remainder of this year because the courts are closed. So I've indicated that $463,363 have been paid to date for tax certiorari claims. On page
What page is that on?
20,
Sorry, what page was the judgment and claims?
21.
21, that's on page 21, and that was a
Got it.
new page that Gina had given you guys today.
Okay.
Okay,
Lisa, I'm sorry, I might have missed. So it's blanked out there, but it's going to have like a $400-something thousand number in there?
the final budget will, yes, because we had to bring that money in over from the tax certiorari reserve to pay the claims that were settled for this year.
How come we had a figure for the adopted budget, but that's blanked out? And I understand that might be different from the actual expenditure figure. I'm just trying to understand why it's blanked out.
Well, when you made the budget for the 1920 school year, there was no dollar amount here. If you remember, it was labeled as other appropriations.
You don't budget for the claims in this year because we've already reserved for them.
We've already, yes.
I see. So the other columns are not what we put in the budget, but the actual expenditures.
Correct. Those
Okay.
columns are all
correct.
actual expenditures.
Yes.
Okay, understood.
Correct.
Before we dive in any deeper, I just realized that it's missing, I think we're missing the headcount chart. This is like a chart that was in the budget traditionally, then it was taken out for like a year or two, but I think we had it in last year to show
Head count of what?
of our
District.
employees. It shows the type
Oh.
of employees, the number of full-time and part-time, and any changes year to year.
Okay,
I think it's like a chart that a lot of people like to look at.
okay. Sure, I can do that. Not a
Thank
problem.
you.
Actually, I believe I have that in one of my spreadsheets, so that'll be easy to add. I'll add that as a page. No problem. Okay, then on page 24, under programs for students with disabilities, I've spoken with Celia and she was comfortable with decreasing the number of teacher aides that she anticipated or proposed. So we have reduced that to 2 that we have currently on staff, and she is anticipating a 3rd. So that number has decreased. And
What
then-
line are you looking at?
I'm sorry, that is page 24, teacher aide salaries. 1, 2, 3, 4th item down.
Thanks.
Just
Okay.
confirming that in the event there was a student need, would we be able to support that student? through
Yes.
the Additional aid position?
Yes. If we had to, yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And then under contracted services, Celia had proposed the Orton Gillingham curriculum, which we have kept in there. But she also proposed, hold on a second, I gotta look up the name. She also proposed another program that was $15,000 and she removed that. Oh, it was called Writing Revolution.
And so these expenses are associated with bringing in a consultant to embed those programs?
Well, the Writing Revolution was, yes, the Orton Gillingham is, she wanted to send all special ed teachers to training, and that is off-site, and it's multiple times in the first year. So that would involve the cost of the program, the materials, travel, lodging, meals. It's the first year is the largest expense. And again, that going back to what Charlie had said, that is a one-time
Okay,
expense.
so it's a training expense.
Yes, correct.
Did you say the Writing Revolution was still in or it was removed?
No, Writing Revolution is out. Celia took that one out and kept Orton Gillingham in. And then, let's see, there was something else I had. Oh, Susan, you had asked a question about if we had the part-time social worker. Yes, we would stack those salaries and we would apply on stack and on Medicaid, depending on what they serviced and who qualified. But yes, those salaries would be going in for reimbursement from the state.
Great. Helps to recoup any amount we can, especially at this point.
Correct. Then on page 25, under computer assisted instruction.
Quick question, just a
Yes.
quick question, just along the lines of what Susan was saying before. In addition to teacher aide salaries, if there were any other changes, hopefully our budget can absorb if we have new special education students move in. I assume that this isn't, I mean, it's as tight as it can be, but it also gives a little room for flexibility should we
Yes.
receive an influx of
Yes.
students in our district.
I
that we'd
have
be
to
able
tell
service
you,
them.
and I think Rich will agree or he'll concur with me that when you put a budget together, especially under the programs for students with disabilities, and particularly in Mechanical.'s case for high school tuition, you always budget for at least one student moving into the district, potentially, because you're going to have to. So if we have a student move in that goes to the high school, I'm not budgeting for exactly what I know is going to be in the high school. I budgeted for at least one additional student moving into the district that's going to pick one of the 3 schools. I do the same thing under programs for students with disabilities, the potential of a student moving into the district that will have to be placed somewhere else because those costs can be rather high.
So is that 2 students, one for high school and one for the other area that we?
Yes,
filled in?
correct, yes.
What
yes.
would happen if we had 4 or 5 students that moved into our district who needed special education services?
Again, I have always, in the past, in my career, have said, if we had something like that happen and we had say a family of 4 or 5 move in, that could potentially shut down your budget because you have to provide those services. So we would have to, again, evaluate the whole budget and see where we would get those funds from to support those students.
That's a little alarming to hear, but has it maybe never happened that we got more than 2 beyond what we budgeted?
I don't believe that you guys have, or Pecanico has gotten more than 2. And not that I have heard from in my conversations with Celia.
Remember as well, when you're building a budget, remember we're given a 4%, cap in terms of our ability to have any sort of overages. So if we were faced with a situation such as that, and the reason that the state allows you to do a 4% is because they absolutely understand that budgets may be set in terms of numbers, but students moving in and out of your district and needs occurring are fluid. And so they allow that, portion to be able to address any immediate needs that you would have. So,
Okay.
in essence, while you're able to build a budget to the best of your ability, you also, have a built-in cushion that, should something occur, it would just lower your 4%.
Thank you, Rich. That's a relief to hear.
And likewise,
Yeah,
I mean, a couple years ago, we had a pretty significant surplus, and I think we tied a lot of it back to planning for those types of contingencies, and we didn't need them. So we ended up having a lot of money left over, which, it doesn't always feel great because it feels like you didn't budget appropriately, but you have to, especially we're such a unique school and that we have to pay tuition for all of our students. Whereas in a more traditional school setting, you just absorb them in the existing programs.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
Well said.
And you have to remember too, when we budget for high school tuition, we're budgeting on the estimated non-resident tuition rates. And that's because when you do state aid over the summer, you're putting in the actual, like this summer, we'll put in the actual numbers for 1920, but we're putting in an estimate for 2021. We use the 3 partner schools' estimated rates because that's what they are reporting to state ed that they will be spending. It's never true to the number, but we usually get a credit, but we have to budget that just in case it gets to that amount. And a lot of times people think that the 4% that you're allowed to keep as unapplied fund balance is, everybody thinks it's, if the roof caves in or, I don't know, the windows blow out, but it's also, again, Kasama, for those if we had more than 2 new students move in, we could use those monies because those are emergency fund kind of monies, okay? So then on page 25, under computer assisted instruction, we had originally budgeted the 225,000 under salaries, but we have recategorized that and put $99,000 in instructional technology salaries, $110,000 in contracted expenses for a part-time company. And then the remaining money has been put into employee benefits for ERS and health insurance for the instructional person that we would hire. Then on page 27.
Hang on, Lisa.
Yes.
I guess that's an extra 210. Is there some similar other expense out of BOCES that would be reduced since we are going to bring that in-house instead?
Yes. Yes.
So where is that?
We're not taking that whole 210, we're taking the 99 from BOCES.
Remember, the others shifted.
But is that reflected in the BOCES services line? Because that's increasing by 41,000.
Right. No, we built that.
That would be reflective when we submit our final service request.
Right.
So that 592 number might decrease by another 99,000?
Increase,
Decrease.
decrease.
We're bringing it,
No, I wouldn't say it would decrease by 99 because the technology, BOCES coasters have increased. We have those numbers. And if you remember too, we also are on a technology plan.
I don't mean like an exact increase or decrease, but if we're bringing some of it in-house, I would expect to see some figure to offset
There would certainly be a reduction. You're absolutely correct, Kasama.
that number. And I was asking whether that is already reflected in the figure for the $41,000 increase, or it's not currently netted in that figure.
It is currently netted in that figure.
Okay,
Yes.
so you've subtracted some amount for
Yes, because we're bringing it in-house. Yes.
bringing that part in-house. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yep. Yep. You're
Can
welcome.
I ask about that? Because I'm thinking about the fall. I'm thinking about what we're hearing in the news about the fact that we may unpause and repause. And that I know that we scrambled to get devices to kids and did a fantastic job. But if we had time and there was an opportunity to redo it, you might do it a little differently, right? Does the budget contemplate that concept of saying, listen, if we end up going back and there's reason enough to plan for it, that we have devices enough where we can possibly make, maybe what we do a little bit smoother, a little bit better, or just, have we contemplated enough devices? Should we repause in the fall in our budget?
Yes, number one, in the current IPA that we are just putting through, we are, purchasing enough devices so that we are able to provide them, to our students, number one. And number two, that same IPA process will be in place for next year as well. And coupling that with, hopefully being able to get some director of technology, some additional director of technology support, and some additional support, in the trenches for technology. We feel confident that would allow us to meet a challenge such as this in an even more seamless fashion.
Joe, that's a good point. I was thinking, do we potentially, Rich, want to do some kind of a survey to find out how students feel about the equipment they have? Maybe some have equipment that's not well functioning, or maybe not even
Right.
functioning, but we don't know about it.
Your IPA for last year was 100,000. It's 100,000 again this year.
Yeah.
So how have you then increased that to make more devices available? If you're doing the exact same amount.
Well, number one, we're shifting a little bit in terms of some of the younger grades on some of the equipment that we're looking at. And so rather than looking for, say, second graders, at a $600 laptop, what we're looking to do is to use a Microsoft Chromebook that we've been piloting in doing that. And in doing so, we're able to get 2 devices for 1 and increase our buying power in that regard, while still maintaining the laptop type technology for 4th through 8th grade. And so, by shifting in that regard, we're able to increase our buying power. And then we're also monitoring very closely where we are, kind of some of our aforementioned, where we are with our fund balance for this year. And we have, depending upon where the figures come out, we have a proposal that will be taken to the board to utilize some of those monies for a one-shot expenditure for some additional hardware.
You've addressed it that way. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, on page 27, under district transportation services, we've kept in there the 66 passenger school bus to continue with the replacement cycle, but we removed the Suburban for $40,000 to reserve that for a future year. We currently have that, we have a Jeep vehicle that we use as for transportation, so we will be able to continue to just use that for next school year. On page 28, under community recreation, we looked at the contract we have with Rivertown for pool services and have decreased that by $15,000 to be more in line with what Jeff has proposed to us should the pool open. On page 29, under employee benefits, as I said before, for that instructional technology position, the state retirement system has increased, and so has the hospital, medical, and dental insurance to include a premium for that employee. We've removed workers' compensation and the unemployment insurance and recommended that we create a reserve for both of those amounts of, for both of those items that can be funded with excess fund balance at the end of each year to provide for claims and premiums for both of those. And then on page.
Hold on, Lisa.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm still a little confused about that. So when I think of reserves, I think of, for example, what we did with tax certiorari. We know of a property that is filing a tax certiorari. We're expecting settlement at some point years down the road. So we put aside the money now to cover that expense when it comes. This feels like, this is an expense that will happen in the 2021 year. So to me, it's not a reserve item.
For workers' comp or
Yeah. Isn't that something that you're gonna, don't we pay that every year?
the workers' comp premium? Yes, we do.
So I don't understand how it's a reserve item. It's an actual expense that the district incurs every single year. So it should be a line item in the budget every year. I don't understand why it's a reserve.
Well, if you're self-insured, you can set up a reserve to fund those expenses. So every year, once the consortium figures out what each district has to pay, and ours has been around about 74, almost 75,000, that goes in to pay claims that are existing and or for future claims. So
Right, but we're going to pay that. We don't know exactly what the amount is, but it's around 75,000 that we're expecting to pay in the 2021 budget year.
yes,
Why isn't that just a line item in the budget? It's not, a reserve to me would be, so we've incurred a liability this year and we're going to pay it in 2023. So because we incurred it this year, we want to reserve for it because the taxpayers this year should pay it. We incurred the liability now. But that's a liability. We're going to pay that in 2021. That's the budget we're reviewing. So why isn't it just a line item in the budget?
it can be. It can be. I mean, if it can be. It can be. It could be. I think it could be either. But if I see your logic and the way what you're thinking, and it could be. We could keep that in and not make that a reserve and have to budget the 75.5.
I mean,
Is there an advantage to?
It
Sorry,
looks like
Charlie.
what we're doing is we're trying to use 2019, 2020 surplus to pay for this. It's almost like we're using an applied fund balance. We're saying, oh, there's a surplus of 75,000. We want to carry it over and pay for that line
And
item.
pay for that.
The way we're going to do it is we're going to set up a reserve in 2019, 2020, which we will use to pay next year. But it seems like a complicated way to use an applied fund balance to me. And I do think that if you reserve it this year, so basically 2019, 2020 budget is paying for it, then next year at this point in time, we're going to have to pay for the following year. Otherwise, we're going to see a spike in the budget. Right? I mean, the whole thing about using applied fund balance for one-off items is that you don't get stuck every year having to fund it with surplus. I think we're putting ourselves in that position. For this
Okay.
85,000, the 75 and the 10, every year at this time, we're going to have to find surplus to quote reserve to fund that item.
Can I ask for clarification? Is this for premiums or for claims that we're reserving and paying?
Actually, it's both. Because we're self-insured, they set aside a reserve for each claim depending on what the injury is.
because I see your point about the premiums, but it might make sense to do the reserve for the claims, Charlie, but not for the premiums.
But I don't think we have the option to, we're not reserving, we pay into a fund that reserves.
Yeah.
So we will actually write a check.
Okay,
And
Okay.
it's about the same every year.
It
Yes.
seems to have been around 75,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yes, yep, yep.
So
If we go back to the way we've always done it, which is to put it back into the budget, does this mean we have to find an extra $85,000 and our levy is gonna go up?
It means that we'd have to either use applied fund balance or we have to cut something out of the budget because we're at our tax levy cap.
Right, right. Okay, so it does mean that.
I just feel like if the group, if the administration, if Rich, this is what you want to do, a more transparent way to do it would be with applied fund balance. As opposed to saying it's a reserve, because to me, reserve is something that's really for a future item. And it's really something in the budget. So if we want to do it that
Well,
way, I would rather
you
use
know,
applied fund balance.
I see your point for workers' comp, but for unemployment insurance, you don't know. Really, unemployment insurance is for a future claim.
But do we have to pay it or do we actually put it aside?
We put it aside. We, as a school district, we are not like other businesses where you pay in quarterly with your quarterly taxes. You know how businesses pay their 941, 940 and their New York State withholding tax. They also pay in unemployment. School districts don't have to do that quarterly. You pay on an as needed basis as claimants file.
So that could be a reserve.
Mhm.
But what about the 10,000 that was in last year's budget? Where did that go?
That went back to, if it wasn't all used, it went back to fund balance.
So that I could see as a reserve, but the workers' compensation, which we're actually gonna have to write a check for, I would think we should have it as a line item, and then we can decide if we
Okay.
want to use applied fund balance for it or not.
Okay.
The other thing is whether or not, we don't need to get into too granular detail here, but is the dollar figure big enough that it really merits a reserve? Or can it kind of be handled with, any applied fund balance? And we're talking, $10,000 here.
It's a good point.
True.
The other thing about the applied fund balance is that it doesn't target a specific item unless, we really think it's a one-off item. So I would say that we find something else that's 75,000 that we're covering.
All right.
Again, I would prefer one-off items as opposed to things that are recurring expenses.
Okay. Okay, then on page 30, we increased the transfer to the school lunch fund. And that is just based on our estimate of where we think that we're going to be this year, where we think we're going next year, and if the second wave of this crisis is coming, and God forbid we have to do something, we would be feeding students, but we would be preparing the meals, but we wouldn't be having breakfast and lunch. Yes, we do get some reimbursement, but we don't get the full like we would during a school year. So we increased that just to make sure that we had enough to support the school lunch fund program. So with that,
When you say you increased it, it looks like it's decreased from the year before. To 100,000 from 125?
right, and again, I'm comparing it to the last proposed budget, so
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it should really
no.
be year over year. We
year
shouldn't
over
compare
year,
the
yeah,
graphs.
so, yeah, so we want to keep it at 100,000. We had it at, I believe, 50. So,
Do you know
Well-
what we spent so far and how it compares to that 125 number for 1920?
we are right now at about 83,000,
And that's because of the extra meals that we're making during this time.
correct? That's part due to that, yes.
Well, that's a worthwhile expense. So if we have to continue to
Yes.
pay for it, we need to budget for it.
Correct. I agree. And I think we have to by state education law, so. So this brings the proposed budget balances with the revenues of 31,147,842, or again, a 1.09% increase from budget to budget.
Again, my one concern is that we're effectively carrying over about $240,000. So there's the 164,769 of applied fund balance that we had already talked about that was in this budget. And then the roughly 75,000 for the workers' compensation. So one, it would be helpful, at least for me, if Rich, you could identify one-off expenses that can give us comfort that a year from now, we're not going to have to come up with another 240,000.
Yep.
I mean, because the last time the district used the applied fund balance, it took over 10 years for them to get away from it. I think it took like 15 years for them to get away from doing that. You get hooked on it.
Yes, you do.
So if you can find one-off items, it just makes me more comfortable.
Happy.
And that can be on either side, you know, expenses or revenues.
Oh yeah, we can do that easily.
But that was it for me.
We don't know when we have to adopt this by, right? Originally, we were supposed to adopt it tonight, but we're not going to do that tonight. Is that right?
That's correct. That's my recommendation to the board. The governor and the Office of Finance have stated that we do not have to have this budget adopted until May 15th. And a big reason that they have extended that is because we will have, perhaps on Friday, a far more focused budget in terms of what our state aid is going to be and what they're going to be able to provide, as well as looking at, as Joe referenced earlier, the potentiality for up to a 20% reduction in educational expenses, albeit spread out into different categories. And so there's a lot of unknowns right now, and this process we may be undergoing again at our next meeting, and with some very specific reductions. And in that regard, I would be guided by the board's, my recommendations with Lisa, we'd be guided by the board's comments from, that have gone on, since July, in terms of ensuring that if we have to make any sort of reductions, that we do so with the understanding of maintaining what our students and teachers need to be successful. And so we would try to the largest extent possible, steer clear to any reductions in our student services.
I have a question about an item that's further down the agenda, because it does look like we have to adopt the property tax report card tonight. How does that bind us? And do we have to do that tonight?
Well, that's a good question. They didn't address that, but
it had to be submitted tonight.
They usually go hand in hand.
Yeah.
yeah, they
I'm
do.
surprised.
They do.
If we decide to
Good
go,
point, Susan.
well, I'm just worried if we decide to go, what number are we using? Are we using the draft budget amount or the tax levy? What did we put in there? The budget amount.
Yes.
But you put both, don't you? I mean,
Yeah. Let me go to that.
And then, because it also contains all sorts of detailed information.
Right.
But I'm
Why
just-
don't we
It
just table it until we actually approve the budgets? I mean, worst case
Right.
scenario.
Now,
it
let me
certainly
tell
seems
you
logical
that-
to do that.
Yep, that was due Monday, April 27th. And I did submit what I've shown you, but it can be revised.
Okay.
Okay,
Good
so
call, Susan. Let's
I didn't want to miss the deadline, otherwise Rich would get a dunning notice that said that we didn't put it in. But, so I put it in knowing that there is a spot for revision. So once we adopt everything and everything, I can go back in and revise that.
Okay,
So your
Lisa,
suggestion then is to actually adopt it tonight and then revise it later.
I'm going to interject here. Okay.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you for hedging our bet by putting it in, knowing that we can change it. Okay, we're hearing from NISCUS Council that we do not have to adopt it tonight.
Okay.
Though it was not specifically referenced, it has been extended out by proxy with the budget affirmation.
Okay, we'll table it.
Yep.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Susan.
Good.
Yeah.
Then,
I'm sorry, one question though. You submitted something, the property tax report card that you submitted, did it have to be approved by the board or it didn't?
Well, no, I think it has to. It's in the system right now. It's in the state ed system.
Right, my question is that an issue that it's in the system and the board didn't adopt it?
Not until we go into the portal and we finalize it.
Oh, I got you. All
Yes,
right.
because we're loading. Yeah.
Yes, I input the information. Rich has to certify it.
Got it.
Okay,
All right.
good questions.
and likewise, what's our timing then on the like public information we have to circulate? Or we sort of,
I've started to work with Kara on that and Carolina. So what I know, I've been able to put in, the three of us have been, I mean, we haven't submitted anything, obviously, because you guys haven't adopted a budget, but we have started to work on it. It won't go to print, obviously, until one, you adopt a budget, and two, we know where the budget vote is going. You know, what are the deadlines? All we know is it's after June 1st. So
the problem is if we don't adopt it till May 20th and the budget vote is June 9th, like that's not enough time to circulate notice to the public. And likewise, especially given that we don't have a forum for the public to come and comment, can we make it well known on our website or through other ways of how people can ask their questions, like through, usually we've had a email or some sort of forum for people to ask their questions.
Yep.
okay, do we have a budget email?
Susan, are you referring to making people aware of all the propositions, for example, like the EPC and the tennis courts, that we really need to inform them and give them enough time so that when the vote comes, it's something that doesn't come as a surprise?
I actually was more talking about our legal requirement, because I think we have a legal requirement to circulate something a certain number of days before the vote.
Mhm.
Right.
So there's that, but yes, you raise a good point that we have to educate our community about what we're recommending. But then I also was asking about, I lost my train of thought about whatever the last thing was I said.
Getting feedback on the budget.
brochure.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Giving people a way, because we basically shut down public, hearing from the public, because we don't have a way to do it on this forum. And so is there a way for people to be able to email you or email Lisa and then we can address it?
There's always been a budget at bocanicahills.org or something like that. We should check if
Exactly.
that's still there.
Yeah.
And then we got the word out that if you have questions, send it to that address.
Sure.
And then we posted on the website the list of questions and the answers. So we have a link on the site for those questions and answers.
Yeah, it'll go out.
I don't know what else we can do.
Yeah, it'll go out this Friday in my message to the community as we know more.
I would like to see people educated about the propositions, only because we've been talking about them for a long time.
Yep.
And whatever lead we can give to the community to make them understand so that, they have what they need to decide, to vote on it, I think would be helpful, would go a long way, rather than whatever the legal requirement might be,
Right.
which might not seem like enough time to absorb that information and to understand.
I
So I
think-
like Susan's idea of having some kind of forum.
Mhm.
This way would, you'd be able to also attack the proposition and kind of informing people about the EPC and the tennis courts.
Yeah, I think that's, spot on and necessary. I should have a draft to share with the board. They just actually promised by Friday of some of the informational pieces and brochures that we would have about the propositions with the EPC and the tennis court and the generator. So yes, I think you're absolutely correct. I'll make sure that we get a budget at bocanicahills.org for questions with a clear explanation of, how to utilize, and that we want to hear from people.
I wonder if it's possible at all to hold a Zoom forum if people wanted to attend and make their comments, because we've had this long period where kind of we haven't had that ability for people to come in and to comment.
Mhm.
And it might be you know, I mean, I think it's a good idea that Susan mentioned, that we really need to have people to give us some way to give feedback. And while email is great, something interactive, I think, would enhance the experience. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes we offer these things and nobody shows up, or sometimes
No, you
we
still
don't
got-
have them and people complain that we don't have them. So it's hard to predict, but it's good to anticipate that people may want to participate and give them that.
We can actually do a
Hi, Gina.
Zoom
The voice
webinar.
of Gina.
Yeah, the
I'm
voice.
here. I am here. We can actually do a Zoom webinar, you know, like a public forum,
Mhm.
where, you know, you guys are all the panelists and then the community can be the attendees. And you can set it up where there can be a question and answer, you know, through the webinar. So we can look into doing that if you guys want to do it.
I mean, personally, I like that idea a lot because it shows a commitment even during these times that we want to hear what others are saying and we want them as partners, and we're committed to having this be two-way.
Yeah, it's easy to lose track of time and context. We're all
It is.
in a strange period. And
Yep.
Rich, I know you and all of your team are working so hard, and so it's hard to keep all these balls in the air, but this is an important thing to make sure we keep refocusing on.
I mean-
Our budget, certainly, and then the propositions we worked hard to pull together. So communication with the community is a key piece of it.
I appreciate that, and I'm in full agreement with all comments, and we'll, I know I have the informational brochures that I'm confident will be going out. However, I'm absolutely, you know, there's nothing like, for lack of a term, you know, the interaction. And so I will absolutely work with Gina tomorrow to look at putting together a Zoom forum to, you know, have some discussions about that, because a lot of our plans were put by the wayside, you know, with social distancing and those sort of things. So I think those are really good suggestions and important.
And I don't know if it has to be all of us board members. It could be a subset, so it's not a formal board meeting. Maybe it's.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be the whole board.
Yeah, it should be a subset because a forum would be a subset of us.
Yeah.
Rich, one last suggestion. When you send the message out to the community, I think it's helpful. Of course, you have your regular updates, but I think if you had something that was focused exclusively on the budget,
Yep,
with budget as like the subject heading, it'll be good for folks because I think it'll catch their eye and they'll know that that's what, you know.
Gina, how can we
Let's get that info.
communicate with the residents? Because in the past, when we had the forums, they were actually very well attended, but I think they got notices in the mail. So I know that we keep email lists of the active parents, but a lot of people who showed up in those community forums weren't necessarily on our email lists because they were the residents whose children have grown up or who don't have any children. And a fair number of them did show up when we have these budget or capital project or anything like that. So how can we make sure that they get the Zoom information? Are we going to do a mailing, or do you have their email addresses?
I mean, we can do a mailing because I can get, you know, a mailing list through our Bold systems. You know, the issue is, you know, I'm working from home. So, you know, you need to figure out how we have to do that. And the other issue is a lot of older people don't have computers or don't understand how to, you know, connect into a Zoom meeting. I mean, we could post it on the website, you know, right on the front page. But if you want to do a mailing, we can absolutely do a mailing. You know, but it's 1,800 registered voters.
Normally, we would do a mailing during the budget season, right? And at this time, because we have the propositions, we might have done more than one mailing, right? Maybe one specific about the propositions and another one about the newsletter, which we always have done.
Well, you would do a mailing, you know, your newsletter, in your newsletter, you would talk about the propositions. You know, it wouldn't necessarily, I mean, that, I don't know, that's Rich's choice if he wants to do two separate mailings regarding the propositions and or the budget, but I would put it together.
But we
Yeah, it should be
couldn't
a
do a
budget
mailing on the
newsletter.
we couldn't do a mailing on the newsletter now because we don't really, we haven't finalized the budget, but we have finalized the propositions.
Correct. You know, you can do a mailing on that as well, yes.
Is there a way, so I'm not very familiar with them, but there's a way to send out like a questionnaire through Microsoft Office. So is that something like, Rich, you could put together a list of things, and they could be topics like the EPC and, the tennis courts, where we want to sort of survey the community and inform them at the same time, and then possibly leave a way for them to enter their own questions.
Yep.
And it may be in a formatted way, so then the response comes back in a way that's easy to aggregate.
Absolutely. In fact, we've been working on getting our first surveys out in terms of where we are with and feedback from our students and from our parents in terms of our remote learning. And so we absolutely can generalize that to that process as well. In fact, I've been on I think I have an appointment tomorrow actually with Alana Winnick to help me work through the final questions for the thing we're using called Pulse. And so we can absolutely do that as well.
But again, that's only, we don't have the entire district's email addresses. We have their addresses, but we don't have their email addresses. That'll, that's mostly for the parents.
Yeah, but we can share that's a good point, Gina, but we can also share the link through a variety of sources and through a lot of our support groups. So I bet we'd get a pretty broad exposure, but in terms of the email addresses themselves to send directly to, we can certainly include in our messaging to share with other educational stakeholders and community members.
Yeah, my concern is I think you have a lot of people who come to do the budget vote, but they're not on our email list. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice to keep them in the loop, and the only way to keep them in the loop might be a mailing.
Yeah.
Right, but if you send it out and then you say, please pass this on to other community members who may not be on our list, people will start distributing it.
Yeah. I think we have to hit it from all sides, especially given the fact that we are as remote as we are in that regard, and as they're separate issues. Truthfully, I think that we'll do a separate mailing regarding the propositions and get that out ASAP, along with corresponding interactive kind of response type thing. And so that we can make sure that they understand exactly what the propositions are, what they would be voting on, what the funding sources would be, especially with that's so important, especially now, as because when you look at state aid, the potential for state aid to be cut, sometimes people don't understand that just because you have a reduction in the state aid doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to do projects, especially as we have when the budget is in a financial position whereby some of the reserve monies can be used and should be utilized in this fashion. Because like with the EPC project, in essence, by funding that money goes back to the community with future reductions in what we would be paying for our utilities and things.
I think it's also really nice to give people something to look forward to, right? I mean, we put these things in place, and when we return to normal, we go boom, and there are some amazing things in the works. I think giving optimistic approaches and saying, we've got these great things that are happening.
Moving forward.
Yeah,
we'll get it out.
Great suggestions and great conversation, everyone. Anything further on the budget before we move on to the next items? We're at 9, so I want to be mindful of time.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to the minutes. And we'll consider the minutes from the regular meeting of April 15th.
I had one comment about the April 15 minutes. In the roll call of executive session, I think usually we put in the time of either departure or the time of coming in. It's missing that information for me. That was the meeting where I came in a little bit after. I mean, it says I wasn't there for the vote to open up the meeting, but usually it has the time of entry or departure. The time of entry if it's later, the time of departure if it's earlier. I mean, that's at least my experience with the other
Are you
past
talking
meetings.
about you or the actual meeting?
I'm sorry, Gina, can you repeat that?
Are you talking about when you came in and or departed, or the actual meeting itself, when it started and when it ended?
No, I'm talking about when I attended the meeting, when I came in.
Okay, well, someone would need to tell me that because I'm not in there.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and see if that was noted.
Okay, we could always update that.
Yeah, I could tell you the time if you want of when Al texted me, and it's pretty much very close to that is when I dialed in.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, just email it to me and I'll fix it.
It's 6:30.
Okay.
Any other comments? If not, I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
Second,
All in favor?
yes.
Yes. Everybody's in favor? I think we're some mutes. Yeah, okay. Moving on to the special meeting minutes from April 20th. I will make a motion to approve.
Like that.
I'll second.
All
Yes.
in favor? Yes, thank
Yep.
you. On to the special meeting of April 21st. I'll also motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in
Yes.
favor? Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
On to discussion items, Rich, starting with building projects EPC/tennis courts.
Okay, great. I'll go through these and obviously we've touched upon some of them because it corresponds exactly with the budgeting process. So I actually had a meeting this morning in Corning before I drove over here with Hunt Architects and Engineers to get a progress update directly, socially distanced, of course. And, you know, they are excited to say that their site work has been completed and they are working to finalize, you know, some of the plans to get them in our hands very, very quickly, including the informational brochures on what the impact and how we would share this information with the public. It's really important to note that this project's also joined with the generator project. And the reason I think this is so vital for our public to understand is that we're living it. We're living right now through, you know, a pandemic. And if we, as a school district, were asked to step forward and become either a housing site or a hospital site, we would be unable to do so because we do not have a generator that is able to run the district. So not only does a generator have an educational impact, meaning our ability to maintain educational services when you know, a branch falls off a tree and takes out a power line, not that that ever happens in our neighborhoods here, but we would also be able to act in a community support sense, you know, if you know, we're faced, or I should say when we're faced with future challenges that impact the community. So that's really important. So we're going along well there. As I said, I hope to have an informational template brochure by Friday to share with the board for some sound bites that we then absolutely not only have to get out through snail mail to our members, but to Kasama and Susan's point, and then all of our points, really make sure that we're maximizing our communication efforts and that we really let people know what they would be voting on, and as importantly, you know, how and why we would be able to fund it. Sometimes the complexities of educational funding, as we've talked about for an hour, the nuances are really very, very intricate. And, you know, especially with the different categories we can have, it's tough in a school sometimes to understand that you have money for one thing, that you can't necessarily use it for something else. And, you know, because of the budgeting of the board in previous years, we're in a great position to be able to bring things like this to our community. Correspondingly, the energy performance contract.
Hold on, Rich, can I stop you for a second?
Oh, of course,
Sorry.
yes.
Would you just make a public service announcement for anybody that's listening for the first time tonight about why why it's important for the generator to be paired with the tennis courts? We all understand it, I think, around this table, but.
Great. Yeah, good point, Susan. Thank you. So we're pairing the generator, with the for lack of a better term, the tennis court project. And as we know, it's far more than just tennis courts. It's a multi-generational project. And again, it's one that our voters have a choice to do, because we know that just for safety and everything else, that we either have to turn it back into what it was intended for, or we have to turn it back into green space. And either way, we have there's a cost associated with it. But under education law as well, whenever you do what's termed site work, and site work is outside work, you have to correspondingly do a portion of inside work. And while it's not a dollar for dollar formula, it has to be paired, and it has to be something that can be seen to support the educational programs. And when we looked at what we had here in our ability to really meet the needs of our public, it seemed to make a lot of sense that when we're looking to serve the public by having something outside that everybody could work and enjoy, that we would also have something that would correspondingly provide for educational and wellness needs. So again, the state law is that if you do outside site work, you have to pair it with inside work that will support the school's academic and educational programs. And then, the other aspect is it seemed to kind of fall in place and make sense that we do one with the other.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And then the energy performance contract, we have had people on site, and they have been climbing on roofs, again, social distance, and they have been, they're well on their way to ensuring that we are going to be able to hit the ground running. In speaking with Day Automation, which I had a meeting with again earlier this week, they are very confident that, and also for the building project, both groups are very confident that should we get, for the building project, should we get a go-ahead from our public in, the June vote or the July vote, they're able to mobilize very, very quickly. And they're also very confident that since state education, and there's been such a hiatus put on any construction work, they're confident in their belief that we will be able to leverage some very good bidding and some very good prices as well. And so, that's certainly a positive, because we want to make sure our dollars that our community has provided us with, get the biggest bang for the buck. So for the energy performance contract, again, the work is progressing, very, very well. They inspected the roof. They believe the roof will absolutely sustain, the solar panels for years to come. And then in particular, the energy performance contract, it's for brochures. What we're making sure that people understand is that, by them voting yes for the energy performance contract, we are able to leverage additional state aid for Pecanico. With a positive vote, we are able to get an additional 10% state aid. As we are all aware, we are able to do a energy performance contract just from the vote of the Board of Education, because an energy performance contract pays you back over an 18-year period, dollar for dollar in terms of your investment. And so the state has put that process in place so as to help districts make smart energy-minded decisions. And then, of course, there's other funding sources that we utilize and tap into, NYSERDA, in state and federal grants, et cetera. So both the building project and the energy performance contract are absolutely on point. And we're ready to, and especially after tonight's discussion, which I greatly appreciate, absolutely ready to communicate these things even further to our community. But knock on wood, we're going forth very well.
Rich, any key next steps on the EPC?
The key next steps are just to continue to support our partners, Day Automation, and then working, with BBS to continue to go and really, work with other stakeholders, et cetera. We have, we're meeting our timeline and our associated tasks. And that says a lot for Day Automation. It says a lot for BBS. Also says a lot, I'm going to, say, for Don Booth and his staff, who do a great job of making sure that we have the everybody's safe, but we're able to open up the district at different times. One of the positive things of being in the shutdown is that we've been able to really go forward, and a lot of the work that is needed to be done and sometimes has to be done in the summer because it necessitates ladders and hallways and drills going off every 2 seconds. We've been able to do because we can ensure social distancing for the workers, but who come in from the outside, but we don't have to worry about the kids. So the key next steps are just to keep the pedal to the metal, to continue to work with our financial advisors to make sure that we are set. Remember, both of these projects would not have any impact would not necessitate an increased levying of taxes to pay for them, because it is our intention to utilize reserve monies to pay for them in this fashion.
Thanks. Questions on this from the board? Moving on to the summer camp pool.
Summer camp and pool. So, our fingers are crossed, and Kelly and Ryan, who are co-camp directors, have sent out a message, I think last week, to our community to let everybody know that, knock on wood, we're hoping to be able to offer camp to everybody. And in that regard, we kept open the registration process through May. And to hope to, continue the understanding that, and the hope that we'd have more information to provide. We also, I want to let the board know, put out in that same notice, an ask that if anybody needed to have their deposit refunded, that we would do so immediately, because we also understand that, with the fiscal instability, that's out there right now, that, every dollar, means a lot to families. So we have those things out there. And then in terms of the pool, I've had meetings, with the company that we utilize to help us keep it open and staffed and things. And, they're in a waiting game just as we are in terms of getting information from the state. Currently, everything is shut down, indoor and outdoor pools. We are hoping that we're going to be able to open. We think that's obviously very important for our community, important for our kids. But just as we are waiting for information about budget votes and things of that, we're waiting for set guidance from the Department of Health and the governor's office in terms of our ability to open the pool and the camp. What I will say is this, is that, if we're unable to open the camp in a physical sense, that we are working on a virtual solution that would help provide some engaging and fun activities for our campers who may be stuck at home. So and in doing so, hoping to if that comes the case, at least provide some activities in that regard. Instructional technology. One thing that we've certainly found with with remote learning is that that you have to make sure that you continue to invest in both your infrastructure, your planning, and your hardware and in your professional development support. And, you know, as you saw from the budget, what we're doing is we're proposing to make sure that we have the people in place to provide that support, the hardware in place to provide the infrastructure, and then as well for long range systems planning. In meeting with our our subgroup for technology. And I don't have all the pieces in place yet, which is why I haven't provided it. We are in agreement that, we need our support for our players on the ground and for professional development. We've been lucky thus far to have some very talented people from BOCES work with us in that, and, specifically Alana Winnick. But we also know we need to pair that with long range planning, and that to do one without the other goes against really a very proactive model. And so I'm working with a couple outside groups to work on providing a solution to the district in that regard. And I'm actually reading an email right now that we may have some of that information before our next meeting. And again, that's supported by the budget. And I just want to make sure that we remember is that, these aren't necessarily a new position. For instance, you remember, when we hired our principal, which, we thank every day for what he's doing, by the way, we didn't take out the salary for the other position that he was fulfilling, knowing that we had to find a solution to take care of that. But at an ask from me to the board, what I asked is that we really looked at that in a very specific sense, and not, find a solution immediately, that we find the right solution, knowing that it would take a little bit longer to do so. And so I think we're very, very close to be able to present a long-term solution. Budget vote. We're waiting for information. Again, I have voiced very strongly, the opinion of our board to NISCUS and to the School Boards Association and to our elected officials that, we feel that a school board vote, a school budget vote is a very democratic process that we wholly support. And so that we are hoping that we're going to be able to have this. Again, though I sound like a broken record in this regard, we're waiting for information as to exactly how that would go forward.
Got it.
As soon as I get it, I will share it with the board. And even more importantly, with due respect, the community.
Absolutely. Thanks for all those updates, Rich.
Sure.
Charlie, go ahead. Did you have a question? Was I hearing something?
No, I'm
Thanks.
good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the discussion points before we move on? We're good. Okay. On to the consent agenda, where I'll start with a motion to approve a consent agenda. If I can have a second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
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 Okay. So as discussed earlier, I will go ahead and remove 8A, the consent agenda. So when we vote, we'll be voting on everything except 8A.
I have a quick question.
Please.
Rich, personnel, can you just give us the quick summary of the plan? I see you're asking for approval of Summer Bridge and extended school year employees.
Oh, yes. Okay. So as we know, with our Summer Bridge programs, we are able to provide some great reading instruction and support and other types of supports to some of our kids who absolutely benefit from it. And that both helps prevent substantial regression or backslide or what have you. And also, more importantly, helps kids go forward and stay in a groove. So many of our young gals and guys at the end of the year are really just starting to make those amazing strides. And so those Summer Bridge programs help to further that. And so we are putting plans in place with the in regards to basically two contingencies. One, we're hoping that we're able to do that right here at school in a face-to-face manner, and our employees are ready to do that. However, if we are unable to do that, then we are ready, willing, and able to provide those same services in a virtual or remote-based manner. And so I'm confident with the employees that we have in place and are recommending that we'll be able to do that. In fact, many of them have already are doing this right now and are even further refining, some of the practices that they have. So we're utilizing, some good people, some good tried and true practices.
I have a follow-up question, if that's all right.
Of course. Yes.
Is this for, well, you have this, you differentiate between summer bridge and then extended school year. So is it intended to happen only if the students are in camp? And how does one qualify for this? Because I expect there's going to be a heightened interest in this type of a service for this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. And in fact, what the elementary principal and I are also doing is looking at the possibility, if necessary, of in essence, and I'm probably going to get in huge trouble with all the students, of looking at a summer school, whether it be virtual or direct in this regard. While there are specific confines and criteria for meeting the ability to be in some of these programs, like extended school year is based far more in terms of needs as indicated on a student's individualized education plan. And then an extended school year, the summer bridge program has been linked with the camp, so that the kids can keep going academically, but make sure that they're kids and they have fun as well. We are just starting to talk as an administration and as actually we'll be talking to our teacher leaders about it at the next meeting, about the need to have some formalized assessment for our kids, so that we can really, to the best of our ability, identify what they need and then put a plan together to see how we're going to get it to them. As I said, we're having those conversations now, and we'll be having it with our teacher leadership teams, coming up. Because at that point too, you have, we can use, some of our formalized assessments, work with our parents in that regard, to make sure that they're an accurate reflection. You can do such things as individualized running records, especially for the auditory aspect and reading fluency and things. But this is you've touched upon a brave new world, for lack of a better term, that we're all looking to try to tackle.
Yeah, thanks for proactively, putting this out there.
Yep. And in that regard, I apologize for my follow-up. It may be that if we identify a larger than normal group that we have to provide services for, that I would be coming back to you and asking for some additional funds to help to help address that. So.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
Other questions on the consent agenda items?
Yeah, question about the appropriation status report. And I don't know, Lisa, if you've gotten to a point where you're projecting our surplus, but first of all, page 6 on the agenda, we can't read. I don't know what happened with the copy of it, just so you know. But I'm looking at it, and it looks like under the available column, which is the far right one, there's about 5.9 million, of which 2 is money that we would put into the tax reserve. So that leaves 3.9. And I'm seeing a lot of available money in regular ed and special ed. I don't know if that's money we expect to spend, or if that actually is going to be, or we're expecting that to be surplus. You're on mute.
There you go. Some of it we do expect to spend, but if you keep going in some of those codes, you'll notice that for some reason, we don't encumber all of our funds. For example, the debt service, that really should be encumbered because we know we're going to spend that money. It shouldn't be in the available column. Same thing with some of the interfund transfers, with some of the employee benefits. So I'm trying to get the business office to encumber those monies so it doesn't make it look like we have all of that available. We're going to have a healthy fund balance because we're really not spending a lot now. So
when can you put together a projection for us of what you actually think will be our fund balance?
yeah, I can work on that. Actually, we've been working on it. Let me just get with Linda and we'll finalize something and we'll put a new projection together for you.
All right, thank you.
Yep, not a problem.
Thanks, Charlie. Other questions on these items? Okay. So if not, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as amended, which includes everything except 8A.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 14th, actually, which is a Thursday. Although we've given our record, we may be meeting before that. But that's the next one that's scheduled. Any other further comments before adjourning?
Are we sure? I mean, are we going to be prepared to adopt a budget that night if we have to? Do we have, I mean, we kind of don't know, do we?
We don't.
I would say that at this point, since the guidance has been that we have to have a budget adopted by the 15th, that we should be prepared to adopt a budget on the 14th. If we get additional information regarding the budget adoption process, we will, we will let the board know. It will be incumbent upon Lisa and I to make the associated changes and get this information back to the board as quickly as possible so that we are able to answer with satisfaction, the questions that you have had and the changes that you have requested us to make.
Does it make any sense? So for Rich, for you to send out a draft budget after you've made those changes that the board can review, and if the board thinks that discussion is required, then we may have to schedule another meeting.
Mhm.
If nobody on the board thinks that discussion is required other than on the 14th, then we can let it go to the 14th. Does that make sense? So in other words, you make changes, send out a draft, we
Perfect
review the
sense.
draft and
Yep.
determine if we need a meeting.
I think we can do that. Lisa, you good with that? Okay.
Super.
So, we'll try to set a target date
That's fine. Yep.
of,
Well, you want to give us like, I don't know. We'll meet next week. I mean, we always meet on Zoom and stuff, but we can meet face to face next week and we'll go over some stuff.
so we should try to get something in hand to the board by next Wednesday, I would say.
Yeah, that's fine. Mhm.
And
Okay.
I think it's good. I mean, it may turn out that you make changes and everyone's okay with them. So it's a very quick review and then we approve it on the 14th.
Well, I think the discussion on the state aid might be a nuanced one. That one might be a.
You're right.
Could be, but it could be
Changer.
one. It could be one that we can cover on the 14th.
Well, maybe we can, Rich, come up with a plan or, multiple plans that if 20% is reduced, this much is produced, this is how we would try to account for
That
it.
would be great.
Yeah, we can just formalize the discussions that we've already been having. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, we don't know, but if there's orders of magnitude that we can plan for and just
Right.
publish, that's fantastic.
All right.
Any other thoughts before wrapping up here? Guys, thanks for a great meeting. Lisa, thanks for all the work on the budgets.
You're welcome.
Have a great rest of your evening. I'll motion to adjourn the public session then.
Thank you all.
Second.
Oh,
All in favor?
yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you.
Rich?